My name is Daniel Masarski. I'm a practice manager within Looker's professional services team. I've been with Looker and Google for about 5 months. Before Looker, I led a professional services team dedicated to embedded analytics, API, and custom development at another large business intelligence platform. Before we get into the best practices, it's important to understand the value and use case for embedded analytics. Embedded analytics lets organizations deliver accurate and near real-time data into purpose-built applications and operational workflows. In other words, embedded analytics helps them put data where their people already work, which is often not a BI report or even a dashboard. And when we talk about embedded, we primarily refer to 2 different use cases. First is integrated insights, where we are able to quickly embed Looker data directly into existing workflows and tools. This brings data directly to the user with minimal development time and effort. Great examples of this include embedding a look or a dashboard into Salesforce or an existing portal as an iframe. Alternatively, using Looker APIs enables developers to build fully bespoke data experiences, making them more effective and efficient. With this approach, Looker becomes the API for all your data. And of course, using the Looker API can also be combined with embedded iframes, best of both worlds. Next, we'll get into the actual purpose and the goal of this session, to review and discuss the best practices. We'll start with arguably the most important best practice, defining your users and their needs. You always want to start by thinking about the users of your application and the problems that they're trying to solve. The scenario you want to avoid is overloading your application with loads of data and functionality designed to satisfy each and every use case and user. It's a common mistake we actually see quite often, where developers or designers fixate on demonstrating the richness of a solution's analytical capabilities. Remember, the majority of your users don't want to see any more than is necessary to meet their objectives. By understanding who your users are and what their specific needs are, you'll be able to better the experience around those needs. So for example, we can lay out 3 different types of users: an executive, a manager, and an analyst. And as you can see in this very high-level kind of chart, an executive might want to see high-level KPIs, whereas an analyst is more interested in ad hoc queries or granular data. And one way we can help define those specific users and their needs is by creating user stories. A common approach is to write these up into a fill-in-the-blank type sentence. As a manager, I would like to see my team's weekly utilization and sales so that I can track progress toward quarterly goals. That's just one example. And of course, for each user, you'll create a different user story, and then you'll develop your application and you'll build out the functionality based on those stories. And before you start developing, wireframing is an excellent way to sketch out and plan what it is that you're actually going to deliver. A wireframe can be as simple or as complex as you need it to be, and it can be created using any sort of method, a whiteboard, a sheet of paper, or any number of tools that are available online. And don't hesitate getting your stakeholders and end users involved. In fact, we highly recommend this because they'll be able to actually provide feedback on the wireframes. Having something tangible for them to see and even possibly interact with is a great way to gather insight. And perhaps most importantly, iterating on wireframes is much, much easier and much quicker than redevelopment of actual code. And on the topic of iteration, Looker believes that starting simple and iterating is the ideal approach to developing an embedded application. Ultimately, embedded analytics, they only provide value when it accomplishes the goals of their users. We believe in a lean startup mindset of rapidly iterating on the data content, the user experience, and finally, the user interface and capabilities. You want your embedded experience to delight users with beautiful UI and engaging UX. One of the principles of good design is always remember to KISS. Keep it super simple. The less your user is required to think, the better. The fewer options you give them, and the fewer actions you require of them, that means the fewer decisions they need to make, and the easier it is to guide them to the intended result. It might seem counterintuitive, but less is actually more here. A clean design is a good design. Building an embedded data experience is all about telling a story. And to create a meaningful narrative, you need to take structure into account. Build your embedded experience with progressive disclosure in mind, which is the practice of showing the most important information right away and then moving detail and less important information to secondary screens whether it be in modals, tabs, or maybe in other views entirely. Don't cram everything into one Looker dashboard and just embed that. Instead, use the available JavaScript callbacks, for example, to catch a user interaction, like clicking on a KPI and redirecting them to a detail page within your application. If embedded analytics is all about telling a story, data visualizations are your main characters. So you want to make sure your visuals are telling an accurate story in the most straightforward way possible. The easiest way to pick the right visual is to start by identifying what it is that you're trying to show your user. And once that's determined, it's as simple as choosing the corresponding chart type for that objective. For example, does your user want to see how values relate to one another? Well, if that's the case, then you might want to show them a column chart or a bar chart. And if they're looking to see these values over time, a line chart or an overlay line chart is another great example of doing that. And then finally, you'll want to maintain a consistent look and feel throughout your app. Pick colors that are consistent with your brand. Don't create a variety show of colors. If your users have become accustomed to seeing a certain dimension value in a specific color, use that. One way to maintain consistent branding and color schemes is to use Looker themes. Themes are supported for embedded looks and dashboards and are a great way to customize the appearance of your embedded Looker dashboards so they better match the environment that you want to embed them in. You can use themes to customize everything, from the font family, text color, background color, and even tile color, amongst other options. For example, you can create a dark theme, like the one shown here, or a light theme, or anything in between. Looker components are a great way to include a filter or a button outside of the embedded iframe, but still maintain consistent UI with Looker. The Looker component library is a set of pre-built React UI components, and you can use them in your web apps. Looker's Embed SDK is a library of functions that you can add to the code of your app to manage embedded dashboards, looks, and explores. The Embed SDK facilitates embedding in several different ways. It provides encapsulation of your embedded content without the need to manually create HTML elements. It also provides point-to-point communication, so there's no cross-frame communication. The Embed SDK handles cross-domain message passing between the host page and your embedded Looker content, making use of a dedicated message channel. It lets your development team focus on the product rather than how Looker integrates with the app. We all know that performance is crucial whenever you're building a web app, and that's especially so when you're embedding analytics into that app. Remember, a slow, beautiful site will always be less satisfying to the user than an inelegant, fast site. To the typical user, speed doesn't only mean performance. Users' perception of your site's speed is heavily influenced by their overall experience, including how efficiently they can get what they want out of your site and how responsive your site feels. Dynamically querying data takes time, even though Looker does it faster than everyone. But we want to make sure that we're not slowing your site and your user's experience down further with poor design. One way to avoid that is to display content as soon as possible so you can reduce the amount of time a user is in the passive mode. For example, as we could see in the animation on the screen, we built this site to quickly load in KPI data from the Looker API and visualize that while the embedded look is being loaded. And as you can see, that KPI data loads much faster and gives the user the appearance that the site is mostly, if not all, loaded. And again, they're not waiting in passive mode for the entire experience to load up. They already have something to interact with and look at. A couple of other performance tips. We want to eagerly embed the iframe before navigation occurs in a single page app. If a user is partially loading the page in an SPA app, the parent application can eagerly embed the content before navigation occurs. Now remember, iframes shouldn't be moved around or removed and inserted from the DOM, as that will trigger a reload. A great way to do this is to use a 1-pixel iframe, again, somewhere upstream before you actually get to the page with analytics on it. And you keep that iframe potentially hidden. And an easy way to do that, that CSS code we have on screen, position, absolute, and left set to -999 pixels. Again, that's just one way to do it. But one way you shouldn't do it is by setting CSS to display none, as that will interfere with content layout within the iframe. Another tip, and we see this quite often, you want to make sure you're avoiding multiple calls to get the SSO embed URL. So really, quite simply, after the initial request for the SSO embed URL, every subsequent request, all you have to do is directly call the embed path of that iframe. You don't need to go through the SSO step, which actually takes the longest since it's a round-trip trip to get the information and all the auth for the SSO. A couple of other tips. You want to avoid reloading the iframe for interactions that are better handled by JavaScript events, such as updating filters or switching dashboard IDs. Again, in this scenario, our Embed SDK makes it much simpler to handle these JavaScript events and actually implement them. You also want to minimize the number of iframes that are embedded on the same page. Now, there is no maximum number of iframes that you can include on a page. Just we always suggest the fewer iframes on the page, the better. So one way to help accomplish this is by consolidating single object iframes on a page. So for example, iframes with just a looker and explorer in them into a dashboard and embedding that dashboard on the page. An alternative approach is for small secondary pieces of content, use API calls to get that data and visualize it, skipping the embed step altogether. And then lastly, and this is a really small but quite useful tip, make sure that load assets from CDN option is enabled in your admin section. And before we get to our demo, let's just talk about Looker APIs. They're your friends. They allow you to build custom functionality into your app by interacting with Looker outside of the embedded iframe. And of course, KPIs can be used in conjunction with the Embed SDK to enable a deeper integration between the application and the embedded iframe, if you choose to use one. As we'll see in the demo, Looker APIs can be combined with our Embed SDK to provide ad hoc and sole service capabilities, amongst other things, to your users. And now, let's go through the demo and actually see some of these best practices in action. To demo some of Looker's embedded best practices and capabilities, we'll be looking at the internal analytics site for Adam Fashion, a fictionalized e-commerce marketplace targeting young adult customers with fast fashion deals. We'll start here at the landing page, where we instantly see the Keep It Simple best practice in action. The page isn't littered with KPIs, charts, and graphs. Instead, we see a row of high-level KPIs up top, an additional row of KPIs and also selection buttons, and a single map visualization showing most recent orders. If we dive into this page a bit further, we can see that the page combines an embedded iframe for the map here, and straight API calls for the top row of KPIs and these buttons. Using our API in this way allowed us to create a completely custom visualization for each KPI here. And as you can see, we're not just showing one metric, such as bounce rate by week being 45%. We're actually even showing a Spark chart here, which shows you the KPI over time, and how the KPI changed here with the up and down arrows. Another added benefit is that by using the APIs in this way, we avoid embedding multiple iframes on this page, which could have had significant performance implications. Now we'll go to the Web Analytics page, where we can see how the developers of the site took an agile approach in building it out. They started by embedding a dashboard using an iframe, with the native filters being part of the dashboard, as you can see right up here. But after seeing how users interact with the page, they decided to give them a way to interact with the filters in a slightly different way, by using custom components outside of the iframe. And as an example, we've included them right here. So when we pop out these custom filters, we can now toggle off the native filters, which is actually done by using iframe parameters. And what the developers were able to do was they were able to create these custom filter components that live outside the iframe, but yet still fully interact with the dashboard. So for example, if I wanted to change the date from last week to last 6 months, you see our dashboard updates right away. We can unselect some of these browser options, again, dashboard updates, and similarly, traffic source could be updated there too. And by the way, these filters, they work really well with Looker components. So you can just drop in some of Looker components in here, hook it into one of your fields, and using the APIs, just update the dashboard right there outside of the iframe. So it's really powerful. you may have also noticed another small change that was implemented by using these custom filters. Making any selection within them automatically reruns the dashboard. So unlike native filters, which require the user to update the dashboard, and I could show you that again right now when we add back the native filters. So again, if I were to add browser is any value, let's just say Chrome, you see what I have to do? I have to rerun it and update the data manually. But because we're using custom components for the filters, we're actually able to use, we're able to code using the Embed SDK for the dashboard once a filter value is selected to automatically be rerun and updated. So what happens is it actually provides a better experience for your end user. Now, it doesn't apply in every use case, and it's not necessarily best practice, but when you automatically update the dashboard in the proper use case, it's more intuitive to the end user, where they can see things updating right in place without them having to take another action. Again, in the goal of providing the best type of user interface, extending your filters to do this oftentimes is a really, really good approach. To demonstrate good UI UX and a pleasing user experience, we're going to head over to the inventory overview page, which has some great examples of how you can embed a dashboard or any iframe and use a combination of API calls and embed methods to manipulate the look and feel. So, for example, using the Embed SDK, we can quickly and easily update quite a few things on an embedded dashboard without having to even reload the iframe. So, for example, we can toggle the tiles within the dashboard in order to allow for a more dynamic view. So as you can see here, we're showing inventory tiles, but then just as easily, I could provide in any different type of UX experience, whether it be a button or another tab, a toggle for them to see orders, for your end users to be able to see these order tiles. Now, again, without even having to switch out the iframe, these tiles could be quickly replaced or even updated. Now, another example is I'm actually able to update the viz colors without doing much of anything other than using the same Embed SDK methods that we've previously used. So for example, right now, you see this is a fairly blue color palette. I could switch it to this green color palette or even this purple one. Again, really simple, a lot of control, and it really makes or it can make your dashboard and entire embed experience really match the rest of your colors and imagery and brand persona. Now, lastly, one thing we can do is we could apply themes to the entire dashboard and the entire embed. And let's say we wanted to go from light to dark. On this instance, I'm using an embed parameter on the URL, and I can switch out the underlying theme that it's using. And now we have this dark theme, and as you can see, it looks completely in line with the rest of our application. So using the various methods we have available makes your entire dashboard and anything you're embedding feel much more native to the rest of your application. Let's go over to the saved reports page, where we have another great example of how APIs can be used with iframes to create an even better experience for your end user. So on this page, the API is pulling down a list of explorers and dashboards that the logged in user has access to. You can see this list right here. Now, the user can select the report they want to see, which then gets passed to the iframe that's right beside it. So right now we're looking at total sales by category, and here you have the view, the visualization that goes with it. Now, let's say your end user wanted to see unit sales by category. It's as simple as clicking it, and there you go. You have it right beside it, and this is embedded using an iframe. And as you can see, the user, and of course these are permissions that are and options that are customizable. The user even has additional options with it, such as exploring from this visualization, being able to save it, download, etc. Now, if the user wants to dig into the data a bit further, they can click Explore right beside here. which switches the iframe into an Explore view. But wait, there's more. So we've also enabled end users to create new reports. Now, what this does is this simply embeds an Explore, and here's our Create New Report option. So we'll go back to Save Reports, and we'll click Create New Report. And what that does is that embeds a completely blank Explore for your end user to use. And from here, they could, of course, create anything they want. They could run it. And when they save it, what happens is once they get saved, because we're pulling down the list of saved reports using the API, it will automatically get pulled down and appear right within your site. As you can see, this is a fairly simple implementation, only using 1 or 2 API calls in our iframes, but it enables your user to have quite a bit of functionality without overcomplicating their experience. Now we'll move to the sales calendar page, where we'll see a really great example of a completely custom visualization that the developers built to satisfy a requirement from their end users. So when the end users came to the product team and saying, we'd like to have a completely custom sales calendar that shows by color when a certain category and a metric did well, they were able to simply and quickly build it using the D3 library and pull in data using inline queries with our API and render it right on this page. So as you can see in the above chart, even filters are able to be implemented, and end users have complete control, being able to filter and select the metric they want to see, with the data updating right in line. Hope this gives you a really great idea of just how powerful our APIs are and what's possible when you combine them with iframes. We hope you also have a good sense of some of the embed best practices, and we would love to work with you in the future to implement them with you and your team. Hopefully that demo gave you some better insight in how we put these best practices into use. Thank you so much for joining the session, and I hope to work with you soon.